So I was a few weeks late finishing season 6 of The Flash, but it dropped on Netflix. I got it finished, so today we're gonna stop and rank all 6 seasons of The Flash from the worst to the best. This probably isn't the best shirt for this video. All right, that's more like it. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share your ranking of all 6 seasons of The Flash. My ranking isn't the right ranking. It's just my ranking, and I would love to see yours, and we're going to disagree. And that's awesome, and the fun part that we can talk in a friendly way about why we liked different seasons more than other ones. So one of my fondest childhood memories is of watching the 1990 TV series, The Flash. I had it recorded on a VHS tape and I'd watched the pilot over and over and over again. So I was actually really excited when they announced that they were going to do a new Flash TV series, and I was watching from episode number 1. And now let's get started talking about all 6 seasons. In last place is season 5. In theory, there's a bunch of things about this season that I really liked. Nora, the idea of their child coming back from the future, very interesting dynamic to throw into the mix of the show. And it makes sense in light of the type of show it is, the characters that they've established, and things that have happened in the past. Likewise, the actress that they cast and the characterization, I liked her likable, kind of bubbly personality that they gave her that was just kind of a nice addition to this particular show. But the way the story played out over the season, it eventually started to get a little bit tedious, the way they were writing her, the choices that they made with her, that it kind of soured me on this character that I actually liked at the beginning. But really, the reason that this season is in last place is I just thought that the cicada plotline was unbelievably tedious. The general idea of someone hunting down metas with a dagger thing that can take away their powers, that's a pretty good idea for a story arc on the show, but it was stretched out way too long. And in order to stretch it out for the full length of the season, they just had to keep coming up with the dumbest reasons that our team of heroes couldn't defeat him. And it was just so unbelievably frustrating. Likewise, the actor they got to portray him, the voice that they had him doing, it just did not work for me. It was so over the top and foreign to this actor doing this kind of thing that it just didn't work. And even when they changed things up and they had Cicada 2 in the mix, it just turned into more of the same. It wasn't him, it was someone else, but it was just kind of same old of, for some reason they have dumb reasons they can't defeat Cicada. And it felt like the whole season was building up to these final twists, and they had to come up with excuses to drag things out to get these final twists about Nora and what she's been up to, why she's been doing it, how she's been manipulated. And it just didn't really work for me. And this season right here is a perfect example of why I think they need shorter seasons and more villains rather than these long stretches of villains for a whole season long. In 5th place is season 3. Now, I think a lot of you have this season much higher up in your ranking. I believe that's the general consensus on this one. And I'll say, I still think it's fun, it's watchable, and it's better than the weaker seasons of Arrow. But to me, this season was just jam-packed with wasted potential and things that really frustrated me with the choices that they made. First off, Flashpoint is one of the best Flash story arcs there is in the comic books, and they decided to cover the whole thing in just one episode. It should have been 4 or 5 episodes of him going in this world and enjoying it and discovering the flaws of it, and then having to struggle, have conflict to get back. Take this great story arc and really do something with it. And they just crammed it into one episode. That was so frustrating to me. If you want a better version of Flashpoint Paradox, check out the movie Flashpoint Paradox that came out about 8 years ago. It's pretty dark, though. It's a very different tone than this one. So that was the first reason that I was frustrated by it. Second reason, because Barry messed up the timeline with Flashpoint and the things that were changed because of it, Barry's brooding the whole season. And whenever that happens, I think it kind of sucks a lot of the life out of the show. One of the things that is unique about this one is that it's a more lighthearted show with characters that don't have to brood all the time. Oliver Queen broods. That's what he does. That's not what Barry Allen does. In some of these seasons, they give him the characters where he isn't acting like himself. He's just brooding the whole time. That frustrates me. Third thing, third season in a row where the main villain was a speedster. And I think they really needed to go in a different direction and not just have these plot lines where Barry's like, I got to run faster. I got to save people. I can't let this person die. And they just kind of did more of that stuff that was kind of they did before, and I wish they'd kind of changed directions a little bit sooner. Fourth one, the time travel logic didn't kind of come together for me of like, wait, how does this work? What does this make sense? How does this fit with the rules that they've established in the past? So unfortunately, those reasons didn't really work for me. Fifth one, I know some of you really liked the episode Duet with the Music Meister. As someone that's watched the Batman Brave and the Bold episode with the Music Meister about 10,000 times with my kids, what they did with Duet, the musical episode here, it just didn't work for me. If it worked for you, cool. I was let down both by the songs and the plot line that they set the whole thing in this nightclub. I just didn't dig it, unfortunately. If you did, awesome. It wasn't for me. But like I said, still a watchable season. I know I'm like bashing it, but that's because I know a lot of you have it higher. I'm giving my reasons why it didn't really work for me. It's still fun and watchable. Next up is season 6. Now, I think this season benefited greatly from having multiple main villains throughout the season, one on the first half, one on the back half, and a lot of kind of side villains with arcs throughout the whole season as well. As I mentioned earlier, I think the show's really struggled when they've tried to take some of these season-long villains and stretch it out. I think that both seasons 4 and 5 had a lot of problems because of those particular choices. This one wisely chose not to do that. Blood work, I really enjoyed the actor that they cast. He was on the show Heroes 10 years ago, so seeing him show up on The Flash was something I really appreciated. The villain himself has he's a very Spider-Man-esque villain in that he's a scientist that experiments on himself with kind of the best of intentions, and it drives him mad. And I think it works well enough for this show, and he's not a speedster. He's something different from a guy that runs really fast. It was a nice change of pace, maybe a little bit dark in the way some of it played out for the show The Flash, but it worked well enough for what they were going for. And on the back half of the season with Mirror Lady, I think some of that was maybe a bit heavy-handed, but it was a plot line that I thought worked well to be stretched out because there were a lot of different dimensions to it, different angles, actually literal different dimensions, different angles that they explored it of them trying to figure out which all the replicas are. They also have kind of the businessman that's working with the terrorist organization. So because of that, it was a more complex plot line than just Cicada's out there and we need to stop him and we keep failing. No, it was multi-dimensional. That helped things out a good bit for me. And I liked that they gave Elongated Man his own kind of personal villain / love interest. They had a great little dynamic and her kind of coming back. You could see the spark between them. Likewise, I think it really worked to have there be consequences for the choices that Barry made during Crisis involving the Speed Force. So he starts to lose his powers. This has consequences because Wally's like, hey man, what did you do? And why didn't you talk to me about this a little bit more? And those sorts of dynamics, I think, are when you have good serialized television of what happens in one episode matters in the next one and builds out the mythology, and it gives him a weakness because when the Flash is just able to be full speed all the time, when he's not battling a speedster, you have to find ways to give him weaknesses, and I thought they found a good way to do that with his character. But on the bad side for this season, a big one that kind of held it back was I just really wasn't a fan of Crisis, and so when the whole first half is kind of building up to the crisis and Barry's brooding because he thinks he has to die, as I mentioned before, that kind of sucks a lot of the joy and fun out of the show for me. And then itself, when Crisis happened, I was very disappointed by it. Kind of soured me a whole lot on Arrowverse in general, especially for this season as a whole. But like I said, the back half, the way they actually treated the villains and a lot of the story arcs that they had in here and new characters they added, I thought benefited the show nicely, and so that's why it's in 4th place. Real quick before I give you my top 3, remember to share your rankings down below in the comment section. I know a lot of you disagree with me. I'm not trying to convince you that I'm right. I'm just giving you my reasons to have a nice fun discussion about a show that we all really enjoy. So be sure to share your ranking down below. Also, if you enjoyed this video, I've got a whole playlist of Arrowverse rankings right over there. So if you enjoy my content about Arrowverse, check out that playlist right over there. There's definitely something that you'll enjoy. In third place is season 4. Now, I'm pretty sure a lot of people are a lot harder on this season than I am, but coming off season 3 that got pretty heavy and dark for this particular show, I actually kind of really appreciated the change of pace for a lighter tone and embracing the campiness. Even in like the addition of elongated man into it, a character who's inherently very goofy and campy, but he fits this particular show, made things a little bit more lighthearted. Likewise, kind of giving us a villain whose power is luck, the Council of Wells, kind of a lot of cheesier things. Once again, I've always enjoyed this show because it's a little bit cheesier and lighthearted. So those are things that I enjoyed about this show. And they took these kind of episodic characters and they would bring them back and incorporate them into the bigger narrative later on. And I thought that was a good way to kind of try and make things work. Likewise, I enjoyed the kind of the tease of Nora at different points in time so you could see what was coming without overplaying their hand. The wedding episode as part of the crossover event really worked for me. This was, I believe, my favorite of the crossovers that they did. And so a bunch of things about it really hit the right notes for me. Main plot line about the Thinker. At first, I dug it because he wasn't a speedster. It got stretched out and they started doing body swapping stuff. That stuff didn't work for me. I wish they hadn't done that. And as I said before, and as I've said many times, I would have preferred that they've done shorter arcs as opposed to like finding an excuse to stretch him out throughout the entire season. But there were things about what he was doing that I appreciated, that it wasn't a speedster. It was someone outsmarting them. Those parts of it I did like. So while this isn't totally top tier The Flash for me, it was just fun and enjoyable and had the tone that I want from this show. Our runner-up is season 1. What a fun, lighthearted addition to the Arrowverse and a nice counterbalance to how inherently kind of brooding and dark Arrow was. And the two together balanced out the Arrowverse in general. I also really enjoyed that season 1 didn't have the weight of having to try and expand everything and go deeper with the mythology. It was just introducing us to all these characters. So we get Barry's origin story, the consequences of the experiment that created him, created all these other metas. And so you have villains of the week. And at that point in time in the show, you could do that, get away with it. And it didn't feel like they were kind of just stretching things out. Also appreciated that during season 1, Barry was still very much doing a lot of police work with Joe. And so you had two sides to his life. Likewise, Iris didn't know he was the Flash. And so because of that, I like that dynamic still being in these shows. As soon as you kind of move down the line into the later seasons on both Arrow and on this one where everyone knows everything, everyone is on the team, the shows lose something that I think adds attention to it. There's not just conflict because there's bad guys out there. There's conflict because we have a hero that needs to keep his identity hidden and he doesn't know how to respond to all the people around him and keep his secrets while being open and honest with them. I enjoy that dynamic on these shows and miss it when it gets lost. Likewise, just having the nice twist reveal with Reverse Flash Ebod, with the Wells character and the way kind of all that played out. I just thought it was a nice way to do a villain on a show like this and have a twist reveal that really worked. The whole time we're wondering, who is it? Who's this person that keeps showing up? Surprise, it's someone that we thought was the mentor, the hero. And even the fact that he kind of Ebod had that relationship with some of the characters that he really cared about. And finally, the show can actually be pretty clever, funny in the way that it does its cultural references. Like, I remember watching the first episode, laughing out loud and thinking to myself, this is actually really funny. I really appreciate that. So whenever I do these rankings, it's always tricky because I really enjoyed both seasons 1 and 2. So picking which one comes out on top, it's always a little bit tricky, but I love this season. But coming in first place is season 2. This is the show, The Flash, in full swing, where they were firing on all cylinders, didn't need to establish the show and introduce everyone, and they knew what worked and they went for it. It expanded the universe by going to multiple Earths at one point in time, but in a way that didn't quite go so far down that path that it just got convoluted or too complex and all the rules of everything taking place. Just the right amount of weird science that added a nice new layer to the show. And I think they were still early enough that they could do another speedster and it still worked for the show because they kind of built into it this idea that he needs to go faster. And they doubled down on stuff that worked from season 1 about his history with his parents, about him needing to learn to use his abilities. And then what I loved is they found a way to use the audience's knowledge of the Flash and Flash mythology against us. So when we get another Earth, Flash showing up from another Earth at the beginning of the season, we just assume that he's another hero that we can trust and go along with for the ride on this one. And then they use that to the show's advantage to kind of subvert our expectations, pull out the rug out from underneath us as we realize that he's not such a good guy after all. All of this kind of setting up the whole mystery of who's the man in the mask. And I was wondering, how are they going to pay this off in a way that feels like it's earned? It makes sense, that we actually appreciate what they're doing with this twist. We get to the end of it, they do the reveal, they take the mask off, and I absolutely loved what they did at the end and what it meant for what they established at the beginning, as well as having a reveal that you could have consequences in the real world with Barry and his dad, while at the same time having a payoff, a continuation of a mentor role in his life, and doing something pretty cool with the actor John Wesley Shipp, that, as I mentioned before, I watched his Flash TV show way back 30 years ago when it first debuted, so I love the way they've used him throughout these shows. So put it all together. I always, like I said, go back and forth between which season I like more. But at the end of the day, I think season 2 has more moments that just kind of hit all the right emotion for me, paid off in such a satisfying manner. So season 2 comes in at number 1. If you've enjoyed this video and want more like it, check out that playlist right over there. I got the seasons of Arrow ranked, the first 4 seasons of Supergirl ranked, the Arrowverse crossovers ranked. If you like the Arrowverse, there's something else over there that you will enjoy. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies and TV too much.